I'm Jamie Nunez. I'd love to smile quite a bit, so we got an energy going over the next hour. I'd like to start this evening with a bit of a story. I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a second. Uh, to start with, a good friend, wonderful, wonderful student of mine that I've known for a number of years. This is Diane. This is her way back when. Diane was a student of mine that in October of 2006, I believe, she came into my office and was a vice principal at the time at a charter school. She said, straight A student, really amazing student, said, Mr. Nunez, I'm pregnant. I said, huh? I'm pregnant and I want to have this child. I said, all right, congratulations. How do you want the school to actually address this? She said, I want everyone to know about this and I'm really excited. And so it was a very, very fascinating time as a vice principal to know that someone that was pregnant was going to be going through the entire experience of having your child at the school. Well, at the same time, Facebook posted the time that they were enabling all of their users to share video, content, photos on their web. You might think it's a bit archaic now. You can sort of click on any website and know that you can link onto Facebook or any of the other social apps. At the time, it was new. So the entire school year, from October all the way to May, she's posting images, the school's getting involved. We're all posting images, photos, videos of her pregnancy. Right around May, I go to the hospital, take some time off from school, go to the hospital to see how she's doing, what the pregnancy is like. So I drive over to Kaiser in San Francisco, and when I go in and check in at the third floor, she's not there. I think, okay, well, maybe she's in another floor. Maybe something happened. So go to another floor. She's not there. Think, oh, maybe she's at the general hospital. So I drive from San Francisco to the general hospital on the outskirts of school, and go to the doctors, check in with the family. Family's not responding. She's also not there. I think, how strange. Maybe today's not the day. I'm driving back to the school, and I get a phone call from the family. Mr. Nunez, would you mind actually coming over to the house? They say. And in that time, I realized two things. Number one is she was never pregnant. And while we can judge and we can say, well, you know, she must have had mental issues, the really bigger issue was how much of social media at the time and how much she was really being impacted by all of the footage that she was having. So I remember her before this being a very shy student, and I remember her during the process and how she became one of the more popular students, how she was essentially validated in the entire experience of the school. And so I remember this because I've spent 15 plus years researching media's use and trauma and how kids are exposed to addiction. But more importantly, I've noticed this is a story that kind of showcases what it is that the power of addiction, the power of social media to kind of influence in our own lives. Well, I think it's important to sort of note that story. I think it's even more important to think about what addiction looks like for our kids' behalf. So let me tell you two things that I'm not doing before I kind of go into the spiel about who we are. I'm not here to judge you as a parent to say, you should be doing this and you're not doing this correctly. If I do, give me that evil look and then say, Jamie, get kicked out of here because I just turned 40 and I have a 4-year-old, but I'm certainly not in the space to give you parenting advice. What I am here to challenge you to do is to be curious with your own child or your own student on what it's like for them to be part of that particular device. And so that's what we're going to be going through to give you some tips on how you can be curious, how you can set those boundaries, but how you actually can be curious when we come to this type of addiction. So I represent Common Sense. We are the leading nonprofit dedicated to helping kids thrive in the digital space. We do a number of things. We rate, we educate, we advocate for families, students, and policymakers. We have a branch that's fairly popular. We've been around for over 15 years, Common Sense Media, where we review apps, books, films, and we've had over 200 syndicated partners across the country. We reach quite millions of people doing that. Part of Common Sense Education is a branch that we support educators across the country as well as in Europe, recent office in London as well as in Mexico, that help teachers and school districts implement our our curriculum, Digital Citizenship curriculum. It's all free. We're at about 700 teachers across the country at the moment, so we reach quite a bit. And then we have a policy arm, Common Sense Kids Action, that is really dedicated to helping families and policymakers support privacy and advocacy issues for families. So, and really what I'd like for us to do this evening is a few things. So before we leave, I'd love to really get us to understand what this addiction looks like, the habits and the roots of these addictive habits that our devices are using. The second thing I'd love to do is really to explore the tools and tips that we have, both at Common Sense and just some general tips that I've seen throughout the time working, both in Common Sense and outside. And then I really want us to practice, so I'm going to challenge you to sort of practice and get us under your seat so you can turn to your partner at some point and say, this is what's going on in our family's life, this is how we're actually going to engage. Sound okay? Here's what I really want to happen though. I really want to find balance in our own digital lives. So while we might say that it's really helpful to understand tools and apps that prevent our kids from being online so much, really what we're trying to do is find that balance. What does that balance actually look like in your own family's life? What are the values associated with that? Everybody okay with that? All right, wonderful. So let's start off. So we've got to start with ourselves, right? I don't have a candy bar or like a raffle or anything like that. I might have some stickers. So, is this a myth or truth? Do you think parents or adults spend less time on their devices than kids, specifically teens?
No. False.
Yeah. It's a myth. Parents are actually spending close to a little under 9.5 hours on screen time daily. That's not like, Jamie, I do work for a living in front of a computer. Like, no. This is outside of work. So, teens spend on average about 6.5 hours daily on screen time. And again, this isn't homework. This isn't my son or daughter's on screen time because they have to participate in school. This is outside of that. While it's small, tweens spend about 4.5 hours, and kids ages 1 to 7 spend about 45 minutes a day. And that's actually up from 15 minutes back in 2012. So you sort of notice this is a very, very huge issue around us. I'm happy to take questions at the very end if you all like, and if there's something you're just like, Jamie, I have to know this, then please interrupt me at any point. So as we know, it's spending quite a bit of time. It often looks like this.
How was school?
I learned the monkey bars.
That's great. Music is so important.
Painting.
To take a camera or something.
Yeah, take some pictures.
We're going on a one-way field trip to Mars.
Let us know if you need a chaperone.
If that happens to you at the house, if there's ever been a time where you just have to check something or something comes up in the family, it might not be the case. Like, media is not allowed during dinner time, Jamie, but for some families, that's the reality, right? And I'd like to challenge us to think that while it's easy to judge, some families really work quite a bit, and so the device is often used as a pseudo babysitter, or sometimes just to fill that time because we're physically and mentally probably exhausted. But it often is the case. I think my 4-year-old, when my partner has to call, or she receives a text from someone in the middle of dinner time, we both look at her like, are you serious? We're about to eat pasta or whatever the case is. But that took some time because it used to be really subtle in our family. Like, let me just respond to this message because my phone was buzzing. So while it's important to note that that's what's happening, I want to first look at what the roots are. What does it actually mean to be addicted to our device? And so part of that the device really starts really early for us. You can kind of notice that as kids, if you've ever seen this clip, kids are exposed to technology at a very, very early age. So the work Irlanda Hernandez out of Spain documented a number of footages around children using tech at an early age and how they're exposed to tactile things at an early age. Kind of see, like, she's thinking about, like, what's going on here? Kind of see the fingers moving, right? It doesn't really work, right? Maybe it's her finger, right? She's had it, right? She wants this, right? Easy to do, right? You know, they say that by the age of 13, families will have posted on average 1,300 images of their kids, or posted some type of video, 1,300 images of their kids by the time they're 11. They say further that according to the study, from ages 11 to 17, kids will post on average of 26 times a day, or roughly about 70,000 images on social media. So as you might imagine that those images, that posting that video, you're bound to have something that might not sound right, might not actually be perceived what other people want it to be. We start thinking a little bit about what this actually does, right? And we know that according to some of these apps, it's intended to be very persuasive. Another study that came up with 95% of commonly downloaded apps marketed to kids 5 and under contain one type of inadvertent advertising. I'll give you a few examples. There's an app called Olaf's Adventures that's brought up by Disney. And if anybody works for Disney, I'm not here to criticize anyone here. That the app itself has a candle right in the middle. It doesn't post whether or not the candle is marketed for anything. It's just a candle that's lit. When the child actually hovers over that candle and touches that candle, it leads them to a store where it asks the child to actually buy something. Right? And another sort of piece, there's a store, again, I can't reference the app name at the moment, but there's a section, that's the Frozen app, where when the child leaves a particular store, the space, the character in the Frozen app begins crying. And so as you can sort of imagine, from an early age, marketing is part of this design. They want kids to stay as long as they can into this particular space. And as we know through UX design or research or psychology, there's a number of ways that addiction becomes very persuasive. Right? So think of the time that you're on Netflix. When you finish your last show, how quickly did you get a chance to decide before the next show actually appeared, right? Notifications are often staggered, and so you might receive some type of notification initially, and then there might be some subtleties or some gaps between the time that you receive the following notifications. In-app purchases, again, if you spend more, you're likely to get better features within the app itself. There's a number of ways in which these tools, these apps, allow our kids to, or force our kids to be a part of this process. So we as adults can easily decipher, sometimes we can't. But for young adults and young kids, that's not always the case. And so we have to understand that by root, the nature of the device itself is geared for it to be very addictive. And I don't like to use that term, but it's intended for the user to be on the space for as long as they can. So that's being measured. We came up at Common Sense, a study. We originally did a study back in 2012. We redid it a number of months, or a number of years later in 2018. We assessed over 1,100 kids, determining what tweens and teens, what their social media use was like. And we discovered a number of things. One being that back in 2012, roughly about 41% of kids had access to a smartphone. Today we know that close to 90% of the kids, according to the survey, have access to a smartphone. While it's not very big, 34% of the kids were on social media, and now we see close to about 70% of kids that are on social media regularly. One of the other studies that discovered this is around a distraction. When asked their likelihood to actually remove some of the content from, or put their phones away during certain activities, things like going to sleep, while 56% of those kids said, yeah, I turn my phone off during that time, 26% of them said, keep that on, right? While doing their homework, 31% put it away. Close to 37% of the kids that we surveyed suggested that it's still on. And this is a big one for us, which is like hanging out with our friends. I don't know about you, but the last time I've seen teens sort of in action, tweens in action, there's always a device in front of them, right? Close to 55%, plus that 28% of the kids at some point have their device on. And while it's important to sort of note the difference, like it's not the tech itself. Love this quote. Adults don't really get it. They think I'm actually addicted to the technology. I'm not. I'm addicted to my friends. Important to differentiate that from the onset, because if you take the device away, the addiction, the connection, the need to be validated by your peers will still appear indirectly through those texts. I'll give you a very quick example. Family I just spoke to about 2 weeks ago said, my daughter has nothing to do with social media, Jamie. I said, really? Congratulations. She's like, no, she doesn't have an account. There's nothing connected to her. So what advice do you have for me? I said, let me just challenge you for a second, right? Why don't we look her up? Why don't we look her up to see whether or not she's online? Let's just see, like, what is your daughter's name? Who are some of her friends, right? Where does she go to school? And so in the 10 minutes that I worked with this gentleman, this dad, not only was she online, she had 2 accounts. And one of her accounts, she was very much promoting something that the dad didn't value. And so the dad was really upset, like, how could she betray me? I said, no, before you start like getting really upset at her, understand the context. That while she violated the rules of the engagement, there's a much powerful sort of thing at play here, and that's her peers. Particularly as kids tend to get older, I cannot stress this enough, this is a very, very big component. So I want to give you a number of tips before we kind of move on. The first is really this idea of aesthetically removing some of the things, the allure to want to be in front of the phone. So I'll give you, I'll actually leave this because for the sake of time, but there's a number of things you can do on your phone. This video shows, one of our actors here, Common Sense, shows you very basic techniques on how to turn your phone into grayscale, which eliminates the need for color. Now, numerous studies suggest that the colors in our apps make us feel prone to want to connect with them. And this is a really simple technique to sort of avoid that. Other things you can possibly do, just in terms of the phone itself as a device, really understanding and turning off these notifications. While it's really hard to say I can't do that, you certainly can. There's a number of ways you can do that, but notifications are a way to reduce the need to want to connect. There's something primarily on Instagram and on Snapchat called streaks. Give you a quick sort of tip on this. Kids use these, and if there's teens or tweens in the room, happy to kind of get your comments at some point. There's a need to connect with your peers for as long as you can because it validates their connections as friends. And so if you and I are friends, we want to maintain that friendship over X amount of days, and that sort of validates the fact that you and I are friends. And so kids are feeling this angst to want to connect, and so one of the ways that you can kind of interfere that or pivot that thought process is to understand the streaks that they have going on with their peers. And so if you see your daughter or your son on these streaks over 100+ days, that's 100 days for them wanting to connect with their peers. We may want to challenge them to say, let's think about other ways of communicating our friendship beyond this particular space. And then, as I noted, this idea of autoplay. It's okay to take a breather, I think, for all of us. One sort of note that we have with kids is autoplays with their Snapchats, particularly, like the need to constantly want to see video. I think I was sharing with a parent here about how addictive it was for them, just kind of glance over a number of videos. Think of the YouTube clips, so like 2 hours later you're looking at a cat jump off of like a pool or something. What's going on? But I think really we came here to ask this bigger question, which is, how is it that my child, how can I help my child balance their media use? I think, is there any other questions that we have? Like, no, James, I didn't come here for that, I wanted something else. This is really what we're trying to do tonight, right? So let's make this happen. I want to encourage us all to start by understanding our digital space. So I'm going to give you a snapshot of what's currently going on as of last week. I might even be outdated as of tomorrow, but as of last week, these are some of the trends that we're starting to see within the area. While I certainly don't want anyone to be experts every week on the latest apps going on, I think it's very helpful to understand sort of how that experience is playing out. And I want us to start with ourselves. So here's what I want us to do. I'm going to do a little challenge. I've done this before across the district, but I want to challenge us all to do it. I want us to take out our phone, do a really simple activity. I want you to scroll through the contact list that you have, and I want you to find a person that you haven't contacted in over a year. And then what I want you to do is to send them a message to say, hey, hope you have a great evening. Don't do nothing else. Don't explain the fact that you haven't contacted them and you've been really busy. Or if you have exes, you don't want to contact them either. We don't want to riot here. But you want to contact them, send them a message, and then put your phone away. If you can, let's take a minute to do that, and we'll see how it plays out. If you get a chance, once you're done with that, if you can turn to the person next to you that sort of ask, just to kind of talk a little bit about why you chose that person, that'd be really helpful as well. Ready? Go.
Somebody that you haven't contacted in a year.
1 year?
Somebody texts us.
We haven't contacted 1 year.
Over, yes.
Yes.
Someone you haven't contacted in over a year.
Okay.
But why I love you? Can't we say how are you?
You can say that, yeah. You can say how are you as well. If you, whatever the case is, don't explain yourself. That's sort of the key to this whole activity, because I'm going to explain what we just did in a second. Yeah. And if you're already feeling anxious, like Jamie, no way in heck am I going to do that. I'll also explain that for you as well. So. About 30 more seconds, and then we'll talk a little bit about this.
On the floor.
I hope you have a good evening.
All right, let's embrace this. Yeah. So I'm going to ask a few questions from you. You don't have to give me the details of your text message. If you're still writing out the text message or letting me know, I'm happy to take those questions. What do you think we just did here? First of all, how many people in the room felt a little anxious about this? Yeah, every time I do it, I feel anxious just thinking about it. How many people are really excited about the responses that they're likely to receive from the person and how they might respond back? How many folks do you think are really excited about doing this more than once and maybe thinking about others that they haven't contacted, thinking about who they haven't contacted in over a year?
Yeah.
What happened today?
So is there anyone in the room that wants to take a bit of a risk and kind of just share a little bit about sort of their thought process? Yeah?
So I can see clearly that you send a response and you're anticipating receiving a response, and it feels good. You haven't connected with them for a while. So yeah, now I'm thinking of 10 other people I should probably contact them, say hi, and wait for a response.
Yeah, appreciate that. I challenge you all at the beginning to think from a curious standpoint, from a perspective of curiosity. This is something in our brains that's what we sort of refer to as sort of the dopamine fix, right? The anxiety that we get from wanting to contact someone, the anticipation of what we're going to say or do in response to their connection. This happens to kids, studies suggest, anywhere between 80 to 200 times a day. So if we think about that perspective in our lives, when we think about our kids making these decisions and these choices, we have to sort of understand it through the lens that they sort of have every day. Do they like that post or not? If they don't like that post, what will that say about the friendship that they have? For younger kids, what are some of the videos that they're watching, and will those videos give them that same sort of feel over time? And while developmentally that's not the stage for some of the kids, we know that these are the things that are actually happening across. We know that because we're seeing patterns of sleep deprivation amongst our kids. So anytime that light is turned on late at night, an hour and a half to 2 hours before the kids are sleeping, and again, we pointed out the amount of time kids were using, so we often ask, well, where is that time found? Oftentimes, that time period is found at night. So if your child is typically tired in the morning, rarely different from what they really are, it might be because they're spending a little bit more time on that device late at night. It might mean that the light is just on while they still might be sleeping. It might mean that the type of sleep that they're getting is not as fluid as they sort of want it to be. So again, there's quite a bit of studies around media use and sleep deprivation. But the point is these kids, this is the context by which kids are actually operating under. We also know that developmentally, as I've shared this across the district, and we know developmentally that the place in our brains where the kids are making choices, the impulse control is found in the prefrontal cortex. And we know that for young women, that's not fully developed until their late teens to early 20s. For young men, that's not mid 20s to early 20s. And sometimes, I'm sorry, Debbie, I always give this joke away, but we know for politicians, it's not until their late 70s. So. What does that mean, though? They're making all these choices in a part of their brain that isn't really fully developed. And they're doing it in a context where they're less likely to be fully alert if they're sleeping less. And they're doing it in a context that's causing anxiety or angst over these decisions that they're making. We've all been through this. It's not that we haven't been part of this development. We know this, that as part of our own sort of development, the need to be validated by our peers is really real. I certainly remember wanting to be liked by my classmates. I'm sure most of us have in the room, that there's a connection to that. We know that we've certainly wanted to take risks. I certainly know growing up, what I used to do is absurd, but we know that I would do a number of these things, and I'm sure all of us in the room took some type of these risks. This is part of development. We know certainly that we're really seeking these connections with our peers in ways that our parents can't give us that, right? So we're trying to figure out and navigate that particular space. So really, what's changed? What's so different now than what was before? How does it actually lead to this particular addiction to this particular device? Well, we know now that things are a little bit different, and that rather than taking risk, kids are seeing acts and then wanting to replicate them. I'll give you a quick example of what that looks like.
This is how I hitchhike.
Is that real or not? Sure? We might know it's not real. It's certainly edited. It's someone that has millions of likes because he does such an amazing job being edited. But oftentimes, that's not always shared until the very end of video clips. So if you have an impulse control to constantly watch different videos, we know acts like this are being replicated today. In fact, some of the sort of settings that I've had, these are some things that kids have sort of wanted to do. So the Kiki challenge of wanting to dance as the car's moving. There's a recent one out that came out about 2 months ago, which is lighting yourself on fire. It starts from your elbow, it starts from your knees. That's sort of a big challenge amongst tweens. I'm not here to be an alarmist. I'm certainly not here to give you all the negatives. These are just the pulse that we're sort of seeing. This is some of the trends that we're actually seeing. So taking risks means something entirely different. It's a new app that just came out probably about a week and a half ago, called Zepeto, right? And Zepeto is an app that is around it's connected to just being connected. The idea is that you take a photo of yourself, there's an avatar that's then created, you enter a space, you designate whether or not that space is actually something that you like, whether it might be your friends or an open space, and then you have a connection with the peers around you. So if you and I are avatars, we might say, hey, how's it going? I really like your face, or I love your hair. And so that's sort of a way that kids are now connecting or being validated by their peers. We also know that it's a connect with a wink, which means that kids are likely to find the space to do a little bit more than connect in these spaces. It actually might mean something like, hey, why don't we connect on Insta? Insta's a great platform for us to connect outside of that. So we see these apps as a space or platforms for kids to connect beyond social sort of engagements. We also know that Zepeto, just like a majority of apps, leave these platforms open. And so while it's easy for kids to close these conversations, more often than not, adults come into these spaces. And again, I'm not here to alarm. This is just the reality of what we're seeing. Things like Zepeto are sort of very basic forms or apps in which kids can engage with strangers, as well as can engage in a sort of familiar way. We know that this often leads to advances in relationships, primarily in middle school, 6th grade on, where we're seeing studies suggest that 51% of young women, 10 to 15, ages 10 to 15, feel that they've had some type of pressure from men in a heterosexual relationship to send some type of sexual image. That's real. I have a 4-year-old daughter. This figure just really hits home for me. And so these are the spaces that happens. And it's important to sort of note that these things take place in platforms that way. So as we start to understand the landscape, these are some of the things that we're doing. Here's where it gets exciting, though. I don't want to live in that space where I'm fearful of my child being on a particular app. But our kids are suggesting this. The study that I referenced earlier around social media use, 54% of these young men and women said if their parents actually knew what was going on social media, they'd be a lot more worried about it. So my question to you, and I'd love for you to turn to the person next to you and see if you can talk about this, is how are you all curious about the activities and the spaces that your child is in online? What do you share? What do you say to your child? What do you do so they know that you're curious about that? It's easy to say, don't be on that or else, ... or I'm taking that phone away for ... or there's no media use in our house, ... But the question more is, how are you actually curious about what they're doing online so you can intersect your values within that? If you could take a moment now to just turn to the person next to you to just answer this question, which is, what have you done, what do you say or do with your child that shows that you're curious about their activities? Not like, hey, I really like your Snapchat. No, like this authentic curiosity. Take a moment now to discuss with the person next to you. Oh, if you don't know one another, feel free to introduce each other. see if we can come back to talk about this because I think it's really important. I think when we start thinking about like tips and curiosity, I think it's the room itself has quite a bit of knowledge base, and so I encourage you as parents to really get together with one another, exchange numbers, exchange ideas. There's some really amazing ideas that often come out of these settings. But again, the takeaway really is curiosity and the level of curiosity on that. This is very, very different than just letting your kids walk all over you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying if we begin the process of being curious about the interests that they have, we can then leverage those interests to do and have them do something else. And so there's a number of tips I sort of want to leave you with. The first is really become familiar with what they find important, both offline and online. My 4-year-old daughter loves dinosaurs, and as I start to reflect on her usage of dinosaurs in an online space, really she doesn't care about the plot. She can care less of the dinosaurs. She likes the art. She likes how dinosaurs are constructed. And what we've realized in looking at her, by observing her, by asking her questions, she really likes things that are tall, short. She really likes working with sizes. So we've applied what she likes with dinosaurs to things like building buildings offline. Maybe the connection that your child has in an online space is one where she or he is very curious about the videos that are posted. Maybe it's the language themselves. Maybe it's the way they like to use media in a particular way. However you find that connection is taking place is a really good starting place. It's an amazing hook to have conversations about other things. Offline, I often observe my daughter. She loves climbing. Again, she's a 4-year-old, and developmentally she might not be in that space. But you might say, Jane, well, you only have one. I have 4, and they're driving me crazy. And so, but the point is just to find that space for yourself to understand what that interest is from them, so you can really leverage that point of view, and then talk about that point of view until they like something else. Teens, I've heard, are very fickle. One week they like something, another week they like something else. It's okay. The trends, the themes seem to be very consistent. Now you might say, Jamie, my child doesn't like anything except going on Fortnite. Well, what is it about Fortnite that they like? Is it the peer connections? Is it the killings that go on there? Is it the costumes? Is it taking your credit card to buy certain things? Like, whatever the case is, you can leverage that point. And again, it doesn't mean that you want to cut off the boundaries. 20 minutes is 20 minutes, and I say 20 minutes, and you've now surpassed that. Here are the consequences. We'll talk about that. But it really starts from a place of curiosity. The second thing I'd sort of point out, which is I shared this slide deck, or this particular slide with many families, and I said, so what are your rules? What are your agreements at home? Like, oh, they're not allowed to do this, and then they name off amazing rules, right? Saturdays and Sundays between 9 and 1, unless they haven't taken out the trash. Like, oh, that's great. I couldn't remember that. So, as busy parents, we often want to set a very high standard, but then we often forget, and our kids really play into that. So it's one thing to acknowledge, to reset, to understand what your agreements are going to be, but those that you tend to forget, I challenge you to really look at what those things are so you can then understand what those boundaries are, right? Really just keep it really simple. In our home, it's very easy. It's posted in a picture, it's posted with 3 statements, and then we've often even sung a song about it. My wife and I both recorded ourselves in front of the camera saying what that means. So if she doesn't get it after 20 minutes, then we'll easily just show her the picture. And if the picture doesn't show her, then we'll introduce her to the letters. And if they don't do that, if we don't have the time, I might just go to YouTube and click my face to say, Amelie, stop watching this, right? And so that's, you might think, Jamie, you're crazy, right? But that's not the case at all. I want to make sure that language is reinforced a number of ways, so she knows that we mean business when it comes to these particular rules. Finally, this is a really challenge for some families, which is before they get on any particular device, role-playing with them, understanding what their experience is going to be like when they're in that space is really helpful for them to understand when they can actually get out of that place. I'll give you a quick example. So if your child is, Fortnite is very big, if your child is right about to enter a 20-minute game, they should know a number of things. Do you know how you're going to behave when these things happen? If not, let's role play. I'm going to be someone that's going to be shouting at you during this game. How are you going to be responding to me? Better yet, think about joining that game, just you and them, so you can actually role play what that experience might look like. It gives them very practical tips to go to when they feel like they're in that space. It's easy to say 20 minutes and then you're done. It's another thing to say, hey, someone's actually yelling at you. How are you processing that? And then anything that they have, the challenges that they have in the online space. When they get comfortable to you, when you recognize their interests, they're more likely to talk about some of the things that they're facing. Particularly if you start early, for those that have tweens, it's never too late to just reset with them and say, these are the standards of engagement, the rules of engagement in our family. We're going to practice them so you actually feel connected to that. I often have a million questions related to this, and I'll certainly take them, but I want to make sure that I do leave some time for this. But these are some simple tips you can actually do. Ultimately, here's what we're trying to do. You don't want them to be reaction. You don't want them to have a reaction every time they're in this particular space. The device already is doing that for them. You want them to be able to take a step back and self-reflect before they actually self-reveal. Is whatever I'm going to say or post, is that representative of the values that our family holds or not? Because you're not talking about them as a person, we're talking about the values you want to exhibit when you're in a space. The reason for that is because ultimately, as I pointed out, they're building what is known as a digital footprint or a digital tattoo. They're building their presence online. And what happens is that as kids develop these footprints, colleges, admission officers, universities are now using their footprints as gauges to whether or not they should accept someone. So if your family thinks from a purely academic standpoint, this is a really good reference point to say, do you want to get in that particular school? 2 years ago, it might have been the last year, 40%, 39% of college admission officers at a number of universities were using students' digital footprints as measures to whether or not they will be accepted in their particular program. Let's think much bigger beyond this sort of fortnight or gauge. These are ways in which kids will be impacted by their particular presence. All right, enough of all this stuff. If there's questions, dying questions, I will take a moment now to address it. Otherwise, I want to leave quite a bit of space to have conversations at the end. I want to make sure that you all leave with tools, so we feel like we've moved away from the addiction, away from the actual understanding of the space into actual practical things. So I want to encourage you start by asking this question, which is, what does actually media balance mean for my family? And the first thing that I will do is, and it sounds like we're in some type of formal contract, I'm going to pass around a document that Common Sense provides. It's just a template of a family and media agreement. The things that you will say and do, your child will say and do when they're in an online space. You can use this as a point of reference if this is something you like. Otherwise, you can use it as a template for you to come up with your own values. We really value in my family communication. It's very important for us to effectively communicate when we're in this particular space. And so our first family agreement is whatever you say in this space, Amelie, you will also say it to your parents. It's very, very clear. So communication might be something that you value. Maybe privacy is something you value. We never want to disclose who we are as a family in an online space because we're very private folks. Or whatever we post to make sure that we appreciate others, not to criticize people in this particular space. Whatever your agreements are, you can reset that. So I'll pass a number of these family media agreements if this is something that resonates with you. It's also on the deck itself if you'd like to take a look at it. And so again, you can easily just have a talking point with your child, post it on the refrigerator, and so anytime you have those conversations where they're challenging you for more time or for something else, you don't have to say much. Look at the refrigerator, please. Now it's up to you as parents to see whether or not you're consistent with your message or whether or not your partner lets them and you have a family that is inconsistent in that sense. That's something that I encourage you sort of all to look at what your communication style is around this particular space. But the values should stay consistent. looks like a little like this. Now you might think, well, what app is actually really good for us? And so I mentioned at the beginning, we've been around for 15 years. There's a number of reviews. This is probably by far the biggest tip that families get out of our presentation. Common Sense Media offers a review, so you can go to it before you're going to go to a movie screening, or if you think a particular app is right for your child. And in our app reviews, or in our books or our movie reviews, we outline, we're unbiased, we don't have an agenda when it comes to this. We outline whether or not it's safe for your child. There's a number of factors that we outline, so you can turn to it to see whether or not it's right for your particular child. It's a really, really good review system that we have there. It's also very age-specific, and so if your child wants to watch a particular movie, there's reviews by kids as well as educators and parents, so it gives you a gauge on We also offer a family resource toolkit. Essentially, what we've decided to do is condense all this information that you might be able to find online about what's right for your child into an actual toolkit. So it's broken down by topics. And so if you think cyberbullying is a really big issue, or in this case, media and devices, we're talking a little bit about digital balance tonight. You can find a number of these things like this deck, part of this deck, but a number of resources that you can then add. The video that we saw at the beginning of the presentation, which was around device-free dinner campaign, you can find some of these things, but they're essentially talking points, topics that you can talk about during family time, during the engagement that you might have. If you're like, I don't even know how to speak to my child about some of these issues, the toolkit is a really good reference and a resource to sort of provide that. In addition to Common Sense resources, a number of other resources that we actually provide as well. I want to practice though, so you can't just leave saying like, okay, Jamie, we're gonna thank you for the information. We need to actually actively figure out what those statements are. So let's do that a little bit. Before I do that though, is there any questions from the audience? Anyone have any questions that I might be able to take at this point? Yes.
Okay, so it feels virtually impossible to take the phone away from the child. My kid is 13, you can tell them at some point today, I need you to be off social media. It cannot be at the same time every day, or off your phone as a whole. Can you not hear?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, is it on? Hello? So I'm trying to figure out how to get my son off social media. It can't be every day, because every day they're at the same time, because there are different activities every day. So at some point I say I want at least a solid 2 hours of no Instagram, no YouTube, no texting, no nothing. How do you, but because it's not the same time every day, it's very hard for it to stick. How do you get them to really put it down? Then they'll tell you, well, I need it during homework because I have to check my teacher's messages. I need to ask Siri what 2 times 2 is. I need to figure out I need it, is what he's telling you. You can't take it away, so.
Good question, for sure. So the question is really about time use and when we actually introduce or take things away from your child. I think the bigger question, and I'll answer that directly in a second, but the question is, the question you may consider asking yourself is, why we want to take it away to begin with? Is it because our kids are spending too much time on it? Or is it, or if it's to do something else very creative? And to that I say, how can we introduce that which is creative in the space, not as a substitute, but as a space that's part of the family engagement? So in my family, this is what we find very important. And so the idea is not, I'm not going to battle with you whether or not I believe that the device is good for you or not. I believe that I want you to be doing these things in your life, and this is how I'm going to be introducing that. So the difference is that the device and the space is not part of the equation. The alternative is part of the actual presence in our family. And I sort of notice the difference when that happens, because we're no longer fighting about the device. We're fighting about whether or not our art program is something that we really value in our house, and kids will shift very quickly to that. If you're still asking me, not you per se, as a child, if you're still asking me whether or not you have a device and that's part of what you should be doing, I'm not going to justify why you should be on your device. I'm going to justify why I believe that these other aspects are important in your life. And if we can entertain that, we have issues around boundaries in that particular way. So just a quick response to that is really not about fighting the device use. That's really hard. And in fact, even if you win, you end up losing because you feel bad about it at some point, right? But it's this idea of introducing something else that the child then has to see as part of the eco of what the family is about. It's a very difficult to make. Yes?
Yeah, regarding the agreement, I'm just wondering, how do you go about convincing your child to have an agreement? A lot of times they're defensive about what they're doing. And also schools are encouraging the social media in their own way. They have their own websites or whatever, intranets where they're chatting with each other. So that becomes part of their life and their social life. So how do you go about kind of managing all that? And a lot of times they're like, oh, I got to do this because I'm talking to my friends about homework or whatever is important as part of their curriculum, right? So how do you go about managing that versus the real distraction?
That's a very good question. I want to touch on a number of issues and a number of questions that you proposed. The first being what values are actually set in your family's home around media agreement. If it's about making sure that the device is not part of the family's value, then that's what it has to be. And the parties, in this case the schools, the social sphere or the social network around your child's life also have to be included in that conversation. But the question really, when you introduce a media agreement, is really addressing what value do you want to place in the device itself and what presence it's going to have. You can easily say, I don't want my child to be part of social media. In fact, districts and schools have an opt-out where you can do other things. And again, I think here at Fremont, they do a pretty good job, but you want to sort of address what those needs are. In the case of my family, this is what social media use is going to be, and reinforcing that with your child through very basic language, which is, while I get that you need to use social media, when it comes to our family's values, this is how we're going to use it. But if you decide that you certainly don't want, or anyone does not want social media to be part of our lives, it's going to be a really, really difficult challenge because, as you pointed out, there's a number of avenues that it's used. So first deciding, what are the value sets that we want? Is it really about no social media or social media being used in this particular way? And how is that reinforced in a language that your child sort of understands? Is it around time? Social media use is an hour. It doesn't matter if you have homework or not. This is how we actually address social media in our home or whatever device. Or is it about actually engaging in the type of communication that goes on in that space? When you introduce things like a media agreement, being very clear about what that point is a really good start. And again, your question is really good, and there's so many layers. It sort of depends on how you value what you're doing. Who else needs to get involved? The school might need to get involved. Grandparents might need to get involved. But it's a multi sort of approach. But really, just starting with that value base. And I'm happy to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Are we going to get slide decks?
Yes. To these slide decks?
Yeah.
Hello, my question is, if we set rules and then the kids doesn't follow, how do we give consequence? I tried if say you violate 3 times, then take away phone for 1 day. He doesn't care or take away 1 day. So if what's the kind of balance? Take too long versus she doesn't care. She can take risk to violate 3 times for take away 1 day.
I appreciate your question. Yeah, if my dad were here, he'd probably say there's a belt and we suspend each other. But I'm just playing. I'm certainly not advocating that. I think it's a good question, which is what are the boundaries that are being set, and how is your child sort of breaking those boundaries? First and foremost, the question really is, when you break a rule in my house, there is nothing that's going to hurt. We're just going to address what that actually means for what you've just done, first and foremost, right? So if the level of rebellion is so much like, I don't actually care there's something that the child actually cares about. I'll give you a quick anecdote just to kind of explain this. I used to work with a number of families when I was teaching. What we'd often do is at the beginning of the year, have the kids talk about what they really care about. You know, the point that I mentioned, which is things that you really care about, you should notice that in your child. So while they might not care about the device being used because they can certainly use another person's device, what they might actually care about is what is actually going on in their particular space. Now, I might challenge you not to be manipulative or to agree, but to say, because you broke these rules, socially, what we're going to let your friends and family know, or your friends on a particular space, is know that you've also broken these rules. Now, if they say they still don't care at that point, please call me because you have an amazing, resilient family. But usually when you let their peers know, their peers become advocates for what it is that they're actually doing in your family's house. So a quick way in doing that is to say, I'm not going to fight you because we're rebellious. Like, we're not going to have a conversation because you don't care. This is just what's going to have to happen until, not that you care, but until you can understand why we're actually doing it. It's a very difficult battle because there's a lot of family dynamics that take place, and it's a very layered concept, but understanding what they're caring about so you can understand what they're actually doing when they say they don't care. What is it that they don't care about? And then the other question is really, or the other point is really a reflection point, which is, what am I doing to create a dynamic where my child says that she or he doesn't care about the consequences? Is there too many rules? Do they feel that there's not enough flexibility? So at some point, there has to be a point in which both parties really come together to say, these are the rules because I care about you and this is what we value. And when you break them, you're also going to, not hurt, but you're also going to be, this is also going to be a pain for you because these are the things that we both really care about. Again, just a really good question. Simplifying the engagements, understanding what they know or what they like, and then ensuring that consequences is not severe, but you really mean it in that sense. So.
Can you give some example?
Yes, I can give you a number of examples, and if anybody else has some examples in the room, we can certainly do that. Probably about a year and a half ago, a family at a school in San Francisco said, my son is getting really low grades in schools, B minuses, C's. Mr. Nunez, can you actually come and help us out? Right? And so I didn't do anything at that point. What I essentially did is I went into the person's social media account and I saw what he or she was doing. Not for a day, but for 2 days. I understood sort of the patterns of what was going on. Right? I understood that they're laughing about certain things. I understood that they wanted to go to some party. And so when I approached that child and with the family, I said, I don't think you're going to go to that party. In fact, not only we're taking your phone away, but here are the things that we need to see you before we even have a conversation about what you're doing on social media. Not only that, I've asked your friends to help you out in this particular space, and so until that time, we're going to be deleting your account. They looked at me like, are you serious? Like, you can't delete my account, I'll just come up with another one. And not only did we do that, though, we've actually communicated to their friends to let them know that this is what they were actually doing. And so all of a sudden they hurt because their peers were validating them in that particular presence. We're not doing it as a manipulation. We're simply saying, this is what the rules that you broke in our house. The family really valued academic integrity and the child wasn't living up to that. And so we let them know that their social circle was actually not worthy of their time until they got to this particular space. And so we entered that particular sphere, and from that point on, the kids realized really quickly when it was interfering with their social space how much the family really meant business. They resented mom and dad. They hated them. They didn't understand. They certainly cursed me out. Like, why would you even do that, Mr. Nunez? But that wasn't the point, because I wasn't there, and I encouraged the family not to engage in the emotional battles that come up with development, but the actual fundamental values that they were progressing, which is just academic integrity in this particular case. Another quick anecdote is a family reached out to me. Way too many rules. I was getting lost just understanding the rules. Way too many rules, very, very much on their child. The child said to me, Mr. Nunez, I can't even breathe. My mom is always on me. My dad is always on me about certain things. I said, so how are you going to communicate that to the family? So we sat down during dinner time, and I said, so why don't you start? Why don't you start by letting me know what it is? And right away, Mom said, no, we're not trying to do that. We're not, like, there was a hovering effect where we didn't allow the child to actually speak about what it is that they needed. So for the family's case, we needed to take a step back to understand what the pressures the child was facing so we can accurately talk about what the expectation was. So there's sort of a fine line about what we're trying to do with the child, as well as making sure that those expectations are really clear. If you can stay afterwards, I have 100. I can put you in touch with a good family, so I'll do that.
I have a follow-up to what the example you
Yes.
just asked. How does one go about getting into their accounts to even know who their friends are? I mean, and then how do I go about deleting something when they broke the rules? How do I go about communicating to their friends saying, hey, they're going to be off the social media for a week for whatever they've done? How is it even possible?
Good, really good question. Like, how do you enter that particular sphere? Remember I talked about at the beginning curiosity? Kids will do so much to make sure that their parents feel proud of them. It might not be the case. It might be like we're in a case of where kids are really distracted. But in my 15 plus years of working with kids and families, kids will go, like, if there's a trust there, if the curiosity is there, if the intention is there, kids will open up really quickly to families when they can understand that. The other thing is making your parent groups a social space, which is not having families talk about what's right or wrong or comparing your child to someone else's family, but rather talking about it as a social piece to say, can we actually go in and talk openly about some of the things that our kids are using in this particular space? You'd be surprised at how well parents, when they work together, allow their kids, the kids give them that freedom to connect. And so the first piece is just understanding what your network is. So your child's friends, sit them down. Let the families know that you're going to be sitting down their child when they're in their space to talk about spaces in social media. Not for you to sort of hover over to monitor. If that's the case, being clear that with your child, like, I am going to be monitoring your social media account. That could be a space, and again, there's ways to divert that, but also knowing why they're doing it. But being extremely clear about why you want to go there in the first place. Because you might find there are things that you don't want to know about your child that you want your child to actually introduce to you. Obviously, if they're in harm or they're in danger, you want to have those conversations early on. But the point of reference is to understand what their interests are, getting the social network to connect with them, and then understanding why you're going into the particular space to begin with. If you're sneaking around, it doesn't make for a recipe for solid communications. But if you're extremely clear about what you're doing and what that device is, usually those expectations are raised. When they break those boundaries, though, the clear thing that I can't stress is know what your consequences are. I'm taking your phone away for 500 days. 20 minutes later, the child's on the iPad. Well, you said you're just taking my phone away. I want to be on the iPad, right? So understanding what that point of consequence is going to be so you can actually get them to sort of engage in that. There's a number of small tips we can kind of go through. Any other final questions before we connect? Yes, thank you.
How do you monitor it? So you have the Facebook, Instagram, my kid's Facebook has nothing in it. Everything is in the message groups. You have so many groups in the in the school.
Yeah.
The messages are in the groups. So before you even see it, even you have access to it. Before you see it, let's delete it.
Yeah. So.
How do you monitor really? All the things. You have the phone, you have the tablet, you have the computer. You have work computer at the school. So they know how to bring computer to school.
Yeah.
Go to a private VPN and then they do want to. They are smarter than how the majority of us.
You're absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. So the question is, how do you actually then monitor it? Like, my question back is really, what are you trying to monitor? And is your child aware that that's what you're trying to monitor for them? Whether or not you're going to outsmart your child, unless there's engineers in the room, which I presume there's plenty, but our kids are very good hackers, and so you raise a very good point around, I can just get around it. And even if you got their account, they might go under a pseudonym. So the question really is, what exactly are you trying to monitor in your child, and have they shared and communicated that with you? So a number of ways you can do that. So there's a number of apps I can kind of show you after the fact, I can add them to the slide deck. That kind of showcases how you can sort of monitor that. If you want your device to be taken away, apps like Yonder, there's a number of apps that sort of physically take the device away. But the question really is communicating from the onset what you want to be connected with them on. I don't want to know that you're communicating to your friend and some girl or some guy that you like. I want to know that you're reinforcing the values that I've set for you. And I want to know that when you fail, that you can turn to me so we can actually address those together. Because if I come to you and I address hate or I judge you based on that, we are not on the same page. And you are not trying to be friends with your child. You're trying to set expectations of them in an offline and an online space.
So the question is, how do you know if they are not breaking or they are breaking your family rules? You have the rules, set up the rules.
Very, very good question. So the question is, again, how do you know whether or not you're breaking it? The first question is ask. And ask them while they're in that space, when you build that trust, ask them to invite you into that space. Now, if there's a deception, where they're giving you one particular way because there's an expectation set, ask. Is there other accounts that you've set up? If so, what are you trying to achieve?
As I said, it's in the Facebook Messenger. There are individual groups in the school. So they do not know what you're talking to the one group to the other.
Yeah, or Snapchat or something like that.
You're not there.
Yeah.
There is no presence of your parent.
Yeah.
You are only to the wall, Facebook wall. That's all you have access to. You are not there in the regular communications where what they chat in the private Facebook groups.
Yeah, and what I found is that kids, while they might be sneaky, their patterns are exhibited over other things that they're actually doing. And so while it's impossible to sort of monitor exactly these sub-private groups, the question really becomes, what are other ways that they show examples of their presence that reinforce the values that you want online? What are the ways in which you've been invited to understand their latest Snapchat with them? Have you asked, can I take a look at that? They might think you're crazy initially, like, what? But when you start the conversation, and I'm sorry everybody, we went way over time, but I want to make sure that we have that. We want to just make sure that that's a starting point, because when you open that channel up, kids will start to share quite a bit of that information. Some apps I can certainly show you at the end on some of the apps that I've seen some parents do, but that's the case. Good question though. Let's work together because I know some talking points as a whole on that. It's 7:40. I want to make sure that I respect your all time. Unless there's other burning questions, I'm happy to stay afterwards. I want to embrace your presence, and unless there's other questions, yes.
Well, you were talking about addiction, right? And addiction is a psychological condition. You cannot just say, oh yeah, you don't go on the phone, right? Cold turkey. It's like telling a heroin addicted person, right? Say, okay, just quit heroin, that's it, right? It doesn't stop like that. So I don't have problem with the social media, but I do have problem with Fortnite, right? Yeah. They want to play it, they want to see videos if they cannot play it, and so on. They are doing it constantly. And when I say that's it, that's enough, they're cranky, they're moody, right? This is, for me, this is like a clear case of addiction, right? So you don't go to cold turkey.
Yeah,
right?
and that's
and
a
the more
very
they
good point.
play, the more they want, right? Obviously, again, another sign of addiction. So how do you fight it?
Yeah,
With heroin, they have like some kind of, I don't know, chemical or something like that that helps the addict. What about Fortnite?
Right. I mean, the Fortnite addiction, geez, there's a whole topic on that stuff. It's probably an hour plus, but I'll give you the very shortened version of that. 3 things. One is not when they're cranky or not using it or not playing it, but do they know going into the space, before I get into Fortnite, this is what this is going to look like. Not what the addiction looks like. We already know once they're on it, it's going to be a challenge. They're going to be really moody. Before you enter the space, these are the 3 things that I want. We're going to practice this until I'm aware that you're responsible in this particular space. If you think after 20 minutes that we're going to be okay with it or not, and you're going to fight back, we're not in that space. And so that's part of what I think we need to do, which is not giving them a device or giving them the Fortnite game, but understand how they're actually getting into the particular space. Second thing is, when they are in that particular space, understanding when it's the end for them and understanding what closure means for them. You know, the point around role playing. Now you have 3 minutes. Let's practice what 3 minutes looks like. For kids, 3 minutes passes like 10 seconds, right? So if we can start to develop that, a habit, when the timer goes off, that is your time to do that. You're likely going to be very
Yes, but the game is designed the way that they cannot switch off.
20 minutes only.
Yeah, 20 minutes, he goes off the game, and then he's moody. He's aggressive, he's moody and everything, right? Like classical symptoms. So I don't have a pill to give him, right, for that.
And it's a really good point. So I think the last piece is really the pivot for them, right?
Yes.
I'm not your clown that I'm then going to entertain you with something else. This is what the transition is going to look like. But again, we start that before that game is even turned on. At the end, let's practice what it's like to kick a ball, do something else, because you're likely to going to come this particular way. You're likely going to give me the exhibit these fields, as you sort of pointed out. I think classic, right? I want on. No, Mom, I hate you. I can't stand this. But if I know the space, okay, I get it. Okay, let's practice. Now here's the ball. The ball's coming in the next 5 minutes. We're going to kick the ball after 5 minutes. Now we've just rung the bell. Now you know what? You're moody on this stuff. Let's reset because we're not ready to be on Fortnite because we haven't prepared what that's going to look like in our space. We talk about addiction, but we rarely talk about what transitions and pivots sort of look like for this kid. So the short answer is, let's understand how we can enter a space and leave the space in a way that families and child can actually be engaged with. That's a start. Then there's another number of other things you can sort of do to monitor their language. If their language levels are getting too high, drop it down. Using ambient music as they're playing, like classical music or some very subtle music, so it's just not a focus. So understanding, there's a number of things. We're doing a workshop on that, but these are small techniques that we can use. But you won't ever compete against the Fortnite piece. It's just understanding how you enter.
And when we find an answer, I need to have an intervention for my 22-year-old son. It's ongoing, and then probably my husband at some point.
Well, the easiest thing for me that I found is to do it late in the evening and they just go to sleep, right? But then again, they have problems falling asleep too, right? Because they just play the computer for an hour.
And the light, the light.
And the light also affects it, right? And they don't sleep that well. But if it's in the middle of the day, then they cannot switch. They know it. They know they're moody because they just played for so long. They know that they want to play some more. They cannot switch. They cannot do anything else. They just go around the house in a bad mood.
One of our sessions in Fremont.
One of them is all on gaming, so I will certainly get back to it. But I will sit back on that. You all, it's been a pleasure. I certainly don't want to. I said 7:30 and it's now 7:40. I'm here to stay as long as you need to. So if you have personal questions.
Can we give Jamie a round of applause?